Hey there, this is Dennis Anyone with Dennis Hensley. It's a podcast about making things up and making things happen. I love talking to creative people about how they do their thing and why they hang in there and keep it going. And today I have two guests. They are the filmmaking team behind the new gay thriller Ganymede, which has just come to video on demand. Colby Holt and Sam Probst. Colby wrote the screenplay and they directed it together. They are also married. And so this is a big passion project for them. And a Ganymede is actually a real thing. I looked it up because I was like, wait, what is this word? I think I've heard of it. And we get into it in the interview. But suffice it to say, this is a fun, thrilling, kind of scary movie that has a line that I think I will always remember, which is this. I believe we're dealing with a Ganymede. And I love that somebody says that dead seriously, because it's a serious thing, you guys. Ganymedes are real. And they need to be dealt with just like Annabelle dolls or whatever it is. Just like Megan robots. It's in that same scary world. So before we get to the interview, though, I want to remind you that this podcast, Dennis Anyone, is brought to you by me. I do it because I love it. It brings me a lot of joy, and I really love having these conversations and sharing people's work with the world. But if you want to support it, there are two things you can do. You can go to DennisAnyone.net, and you can contribute to my virtual tip jar, help me cover my expenses. I really appreciate that. And also, there's a new thing there called Buy Me a Coffee, where for the price of a cup of coffee, you can say, hey, I enjoy the podcast. I love it. It puts a smile on my face. So that's at DennisAnyone.net. And the other thing you could do is become a subscriber to DNR Studios. I'm part of a group of shows under the Derek and Romaine podcast banner, a lot of great gay shows. And for a monthly fee, you get my show early and you get all these other cool shows. So check that out at dnrstudios.com. And now here's my interview with the filmmaking team behind Ganymede, Colby Holt and Sam Probst. Joining me now from Chicago, it's the filmmakers behind the new gay thriller Ganymede. It's Colby Holt and Sam Probst. Welcome, guys, to the podcast.
Hey, Dennis.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
I got a kick out of your movie. Like, here's my thing. I have friends that love scary movies. I have friends that can't watch them. I'm somewhere in the middle. And here's the thing. I'm not that scared of zombies. I'm not that scared of dolls that are going to have a demon or whatever. Homophobes with shock therapy, self-loathing, religion, yeah, that's the kind of terror that I think is real, and I could see going to the place that your movie goes to. So congrats on being genuinely a scary thing. Colby, let's start with...
It is quite horrifying, so,
Yeah, we think it's scary, too.
We'll take the accolade, but acknowledge it's a horrible problem.
No, it's a real kind of terror, and especially through the eyes of your protagonist, who's a young gay guy struggling with himself in this really strict family. Colby, let's start with you. Where did the germ of the idea come from? Because you wrote the screenplay.
Yeah, so I started working on the screenplay in 2019. So obviously the 2020 election was right around the corner, so this was a time where rhetoric was kind of increasing. And, our community, the LGBTQ community, has been a longtime cudgel of the right to motivate people and kind of polarize. And so around this time, I noticed the rhetoric really was kind of ramping up, and it was not only ramping up, but taking on a particularly religious tone, referring to us as demonic. You see the origins of this kind of groomer phenomenon going on, and it's this idea that we are somehow some manifestation of, religious evil that is trying to tempt others into the lifestyle. And so we started thinking about, okay, like if you're growing up in this kind of ideology, if you're in a household where this is the mindset, like if you perceive your own queerness as an evil entity, how does that affect your psyche and how does that manifest in your life?
Yeah, I love that. Now, I did not know this, but a Ganymede is a real thing. I went and looked it up after I saw your movie. It's a thing. Sam, where does that word come from? And why did you guys decide that was the perfect title for this?
I mean, it's funny because historically it has been a term that has been utilized throughout all sorts of phases and sectors of queer identity being present in history. And this was something Colby recognized when he was writing another script that we were considering making a story out of. And that was about Molly houses. Is that correct, Colby?
Yeah. So Molly houses are 16 and 1700s, like the equivalent of a gay bar in a London. And so I had this idea, and we ultimately I didn't write it, didn't make it, but I did a bunch of research on them, and that's where I first came across the term Ganymede.
And what time period was that? Like 19?
This was the 1600s and 1700s, and so it was being used to refer to kind of a like foppish, effeminate young man who was like tempting to others.
Right. A little tempting piece of jailbait, right? Like
Exactly.
You just imagine somebody on a beach, like a little cutie, right?
Here in Chicago, Hollywood Beach has plenty of them.
There's Ganymedes everywhere you look. I think my favorite line, and I really want to start incorporating it into my day-to-day life, is, I believe we're dealing with a Ganymede. That's one of the preacher.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Let's make a term for that. I love that.
Yeah. I was like, look, the Ganymedes as far as the eye can see. Also, I want to give you props for the font when your title card appears. That kind of goopy, loopy. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate that. Our friend Nate Stoner, who is a graphic designer and is incredibly talented, he did that custom made, and he, I feel like personally for me, I was trying to convey him like that that Goosebumps thing.
Yeah, it has that kind of thing. It says,
okay, good.
And I love it. Yeah, you nailed it.
It's definitely inspired by some of the like Southern Gothic films of like the 60s. And we kind of wanted to get that like pulpy kind of.
Yeah.
For the characters in it, it's dead serious, but there's a tone to it that's a little lighter, a little campier at times in your filmmaking, which I appreciated. Colby, why don't you say a little bit about the story for people that don't know anything about what happens in the movie? How would you describe the plot?
Yeah, so it's about the son of a prominent small town politician who is a wrestling star, and he begins to develop feelings for his openly gay classmate, and then becomes stalked by a creature that is, inhabiting his closets and increasingly his thoughts. And so it's a little bit of a love story. It's a Southern Gothic thriller. It's a horror film. So it's kind of bending genres together. It's a little coming of age too, but it's super queer. So, yeah, that's my description.
That sounds like a movie I watched. The guy that plays your lead, Jordan Doww, he is so good at playing scared, terrified. Like, how did you find him, and did you audition? Because being that kind of terrified is hard, I think, to convey at the intensity that he does it. So can you talk about casting him?
Yeah, well, appreciate you saying that. I mean, Jordan's fantastic. He's so talented, and we originally found him through our casting director, Matthew Glasner, who has been such a pivotal part. Him and our producer, Steve Stanley, they both were really strong advocates for a full ensemble cast that could bring a lot of heavy punch to the talent. And that was the first person we started with, was Jordan and little Lee's character. And I believe we're looking through a pretty expansive list. And there was actually... we wanted also to try to narrow it down to ideally potentially someone who's queer identified. And, Jordan was very actively, openly, proudly gay on his YouTube channel. He had done work as an actor. He had done work as an openly gay actor. And that, was something that really we liked about that character specifically, and him embodying that and putting that out there. And it's interesting. We actually did not do other auditions. It was someone that we really did take a really strong leap of faith and say, this is, I think, who it is. And would you say that experience for you?
Yeah. And then so we sent it to him, and he really responded to it. And this was, I believe we locked Jordan down at the very beginning of March of 2020.
Right.
So it was like, boom, we got our first
shutdown,
and then shut down. And so it was like, holy cow. And so Jordan remained attached to the project for like
about 2 years.
2 years through COVID, before we were able to finally get to production post-COVID. Well, during COVID. It wasn't even post-COVID.
Yeah, because we were still testing, masking all of it.
It's funny, you look at the publicity stills of the shoot, and it's like the masks, and you're like, oh yeah, that was the thing that happened.
Yeah,
that's right.
And then you have the actor that plays Kyle, Pablo Castel Blanco. Can you talk about him? He's got a really appealing quality to him.
Oh, he's amazing. He was one of those ones where we saw the auditions and we're like, oh, well, there he is. It was kind of like very obvious to us.
Yeah. Pablo was also brought to us by Matthew. And, out of like the 20 to 40 different reads we saw, he was so instantly the one that we were like, this is exactly who we want to be.
Yeah.
We wanted to have the Culper family be a Latin American family. I'm Mexican American, so we wanted to implement some of the identity and nuances of a small town and the identity as well. And Pablo was who we cast first. Pablo's Colombian, so we also cast a Colombian mother, which is Sophia, and she was fantastic. And we just really loved that Pablo's character is such a contrast to what Lee's character is. And we loved the way that they both really leaned into those performances so successfully and really complemented each other with the strength that they had, is what we feel personally.
Yeah, I thought they were both great and together as well. There's a teacher named Mrs. K who is the teacher that every queer kid deserves, who kind of sees them for who they are and kind of does what she can. Did you guys have teachers like that? Do you remember a teacher that you felt like saw you, even though
Gosh,
they
what
couldn't?
a great question. Not as an openly gay person. I wasn't out until I was 20 something. And I think for me, Kimpton was probably the type of character I wish I would have had as a teacher in my own personal life. But maybe that's different for you. Actually, I'm curious for you as well.
Yeah. I did come out in high school, and I was openly gay my full senior year. And I had, it's always the English teacher, but
Mine was my English teacher.
Mr.
Smithson. Who's
What
yours?
is it?
Mine was Mrs. Smithson. Who was yours?
I love that
mine's
name.
Mr. Smith.
Okay.
Oh, wow. That's some things.
All right.
And so, Mr. Smith was just wonderful, and he was such a safe space for me in class. And he was openly gay. It was like something. This was 2007. This is something that it wasn't like people were being like, he's gay. But I mean, everybody knew. He acknowledged it.
Right.
He acknowledged that I was gay, which was funny. And yeah, he was a great teacher, and I really always knew that I could go to him and be like, this is what's going on, and be like, girl, like he was just wonderful. He's passed on now, but gosh, shouts out to Smitty. He was wonderful.
What was it like to be out in high school? How did you do it?
It was this weird, well, the first thing is I remember in being in chemistry class, this is before I was out. This was like sophomore year. And this guy, my friend now, was walking down the hallway, and my chemistry partner was like, that guy was like, he's openly gay. He's like, tells people he's openly gay. And I was like, not out yet, but thinking, what? He's just walking down the hallway. He's
That's a thing people can do?
I was like, okay, he's not, like bursting into flames, so I guess like this is a possibility for me. And then it took another year, but then junior year, I finally came out, and had been bullied a little bit before that. But this peculiar thing happens that sometimes when you come out and you're like, yeah, I am gay, then they just really look like assholes. And it kind of all just dropped because I finally said the thing that they were all hinting at. And then it was like, well, what further can you really do with that, without just being totally hateful? And well, some were, but most of the time at that time, honestly, they were being alienated if they were like, it was like, come on. Yeah.
Yeah. Where were you in school? Where did you go to school?
In Kentucky.
Right on. Mitch McConnell land.
Yeah.
There you go.
We filmed in the same town he grew up in, actually, which is Paducah, Kentucky, which is a very cute and charming town, but it's also a town in Kentucky. So you're living in a world where, like South Bend, Indiana, where I grew up, where you kind of have those experiences of you'll have a pride flag, and the next door you'll have a Trump sign. It's part of the divide of those lives.
Well, and we shot the school scenes at my old high school, literally where I used to walk down the halls being openly gay. I mean, the part we shot in was not built at the time. It's brand new, but it's the same grounds. And it was there was a moment that it was like, this is crazy. Like some of the experiences I had here are now that made it into the script are now being translated into film, and we're actually in the spot where some of the inspiration happened. So it was a very strange experience for me.
I used to daydream about making a film in my hometown, which is a small town in northern Arizona called Holbrook. I had this fantasy of I could help the economy and we could shoot here and here. You did that. You shot in your hometown.
Yeah, we did.
Was it cool? Did they love it? Was it glamorous for the town?
For the most part, yeah. You know, I mean, I think people were like, "Oh, they're making a movie here," and people would, cite some of the actors and be like, "There they are."
People would take pages of the script out of the trash can.
Yeah,
it was
they would wait. They would do what?
They would try if an actor was reading a page of the script at a coffee shop, like people would take the page of the script out of the trash can and read it to like get an idea of like what the story was. So like there definitely was some sort of starstruck component to that, and which was funny. For what it's worth, I definitely think a story in Arizona would be fascinating too. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like there's enough stories that tell like what that life would be in a state like Arizona.
Well, just like your town, you love your town and you want to like the places that have sentimental value to you or the landscape or whatever you think is special about it. Like I used to have that fantasy and you did it. There's a lot of underwater stuff in your movie. Was that in your town as well?
Yeah, we shot that in our town as well, just in a pool. It was shot in a pool. Yeah.
What's it like to shoot that underwater stuff? How hard is it?
I would say stressful. I'm not sure if it seems stressful when you're watching, but like it was, I think, one of the harder days of the shoot.
Well, safety comes into play here,
which is obviously,
and that's very, very important. And so, while we are, in a pool swimming around, that sounds very normal. That we're asking them to do things. Some of them are in appliances and makeup underwater, which is very. It's suffocating to feel like, okay, I have a mask on now. I'm underwater. And
luckily we had a wonderful stunt coordinator named Jessica Bennett, and we had a water safety team, and we had everything to make sure that it would all go well. But, our stunt coordinator was always reminding that at any minute, like it could just get scary quickly. And so we always had to be on the lookout for the safety of the actors and for the successful capture of everything in the environment. But yeah, that was a really interesting and different one for us that we've never done before. So appreciate the question about it. It was crazy.
Yeah, no, it was cool. There's an actor that appears in the beginning of your movie, Pete Zias, who I know from LA is one of the funniest actors in the world. And he's in the beginning, and then we don't see him for a while. And I thought, they had Pete Zias, but he's not funny in this at all. That's cool. And then he shows up later and is really pretty funny in a way. Talk about casting him and working with him.
Well, Pete, we lived in Los Angeles for we're in Chicago now, but we lived there for 5 years, which is how we met Pete.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Saw him out and about at Akbar and whatnot, and at a certain point, I asked him if he would be in our first film, which is called Pig Hag, and he's in that as well. And I kind of wrote the part for him. And then so when I was writing this part, I was kind of inspired by the American Werewolf in Paris, where his friend is like this revenant who comes back and is like in various stages of decay.
Yeah.
It's like, what if it was that for this story, but it was Pete, and he plays this brother who is like really the root of everything that's going on with Floyd. And we have this like revenant moment where he returns, but it's like, it's this scary version. He's come to say to his sister, like, girl, like, get it together, and I wrote it for Pete. I wrote it in Pete's voice, and he's just wonderful to work with. I mean, he's hilarious, so talented, and just, I can't say enough nice things.
Yeah, I was so excited to see him come back in that scene, and then the way it's written and the way he portrays it it's really great. Robyn Lively plays your protagonist's mother. She's giving us Sandra Bullock in The Blind Side highlights, right? Like she's really good too. And you feel the pain of like somebody that has to believe this stuff to keep her family together. Like you just feel it, right? And she's somebody that we've seen in other things as well. And then you have David Koechner. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
That's right.
From Anchorman as the local preacher. Can you talk about working with some of these other actors that people may have seen in other things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're all incredible individuals who, something we're really proud of with this is that it feels like they're all doing something very different than what they usually do for their work. But correct me if I'm wrong, when we were talking about casting and these people who were playing these roles, one thing you liked about all of them was just that they are able to play any role because they play it with such conviction. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're all incredibly grounded performers, wonderful actors. And I like to say part of what makes David's performance so scary is the same thing that makes his other performances so funny, which is that he commits to it, is grounded, and believes every single word that he's saying. He's never really like winking at the audience. It's not kind of a nudge. It's kind of like, I'm playing this with sincerity.
Yeah, I'm going to hook up this kid to this electroshock thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm all in on it. Damn.
For this type of piece, you have to treat it with that sincerity. And that is, I think, what made all of the performances successful, whether it's Robyn or Robyn.
Yeah.
You guys co-directed. How does that work on the set? Is somebody like, I'm more with the actors, I'm more with the shots? Like, how do you guys divide up that job?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Colby is often more with the actors, and I'll be more with the shots. Like I'll be talking with Oscar, our cinematographer, and going through the shot list or going through the composition or what have you on set, while Colby is going through the script with the actor, and they'll be talking through what they're about to shoot a little bit more here. And
I'll be looking at costumes and hair and set dressing and things like that. And so it's kind of nice to be able to like divide and conquer in that way.
Yeah. And we are always at every phase with it, we're part of it with one another for it. You know, when he's writing, I'm giving him thoughts and feedback. When I'm editing, he's giving me thoughts and feedback. And we do feel proud that we're able to do something that feels, honestly, something we've done together. And something that's better than one of us could do versus the other. Like, I don't think I'd be able to make as good of a movie without Colby.
And vice versa. Our films come out the way they do because we do them together. And it just is, I don't know, we've been working together for a long time, and we're married and live in our house together with the film. Yeah. And,
actually the monsters are looking up at us right now.
Oh, there they are. You're showing us monsters. Oh, I love it. Yeah. Those are from the movie.
The headpieces are on these busts that they gave us. The special effects, Anthony Kozar, he gave us these at the end of the shoot. So it literally lives with us at all times in our life. So
you've got, I believe we're dealing with the Ganymede, as to quote the movie. Do you guys ever disagree on anything creatively?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
What's your biggest throwdown that you had?
Oh, man. Well, I would say on set, if I am picturing like a time where we probably once each week had a moment where we had to be like, hey, can we sideline about this? And like have like a disagreement, tiff, whatever about it. And they were all stupid ones in retrospect, kind of.
Well, actually, I have a good example considering we were just talking about our like division of labor. We have to be careful about it because on this particular day where we had this, disagreement, Sam had set up this whole shot, all the lighting, cinematography, all of that. Mm-hmm. And I had been doing all the other, being with the makeup people and this and that.
By everybody, yeah.
And it wasn't until the moment we were shooting the shot that we realized that the like gash that needed to be seen was on the wrong side. And so like, it was either, when we'd already filmed it on that side the whole time. And it was like, because we were separate that we did not put this together till the moment. And then it was like, well, we have to reset this like whole thing. Like we're ready to shoot. And we just realized we really should have been on the same page about, where the gash was and how we were.
Right.
And
yeah. I mean, that was a really good learning lesson of like, okay, cause I think after that day, we ended up like being sure to just be as much around, at the start of the day as possible with one another. Cause like you walk on and literally everyone has like 100 questions for you. And if they pull you apart, that's great. You can answer, 100 questions.
And you're going to be like set up sooner,
but then you might be answering something that might help to have the alignment of your co-director. So those were moments where you're like, oh shit, like we didn't align with this when we should have.
And luckily our, lovely producer, Steve Stanley, would always kind of step in and be like, all right, boys, let's get to an agreement here. Let's get to an agreement and move on.
Right on. All right.
Yeah. But it was good. Yeah.
How hard was this movie to get made? Was it something that you tried for a long time, or how did it come together?
Yeah, incredibly hard, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, we were obviously one big battle was COVID. I mean, it was, there was so much uncertainty. It was like, what are we going to do here? And then on top of that, I think it's safe to say that gay, queer projects like take a little bit more faith from people to invest in and to get behind. And that is just a truth of the business. Mm-hmm. And we were really lucky to have, Iris Indy and folks from Dentsu and
Steve Stanley is championing the film. It's like,
I mean, it was really Steve is the one who put all of the financials together and got everybody on the same page and really like made it happen, which is the hard work of a producer. And then it was our job to like say, yeah, we can handle this vision. And so it took a little bit. This one was like an uphill battle, but I wouldn't do it any differently. Because the time that we had, the team that we eventually had ultimately led to this film being what it is. And I can't imagine it being different.
Yeah.
I think a good part about having a partnership like you guys have is if, the business is tough and being a creative person, it's like there are days where you want to give up. And with yours, like the other one could be up when you're down and down when you're up. Like, is that true? Or do you both get down at the same time and then you're screwed?
No, that is so true. I mean, there'll be days where like one of us will walk into in the room where the other person's be like, please just talk me off the ledge of this thing. And that like, this is not.
Let's go into real estate. Screw it. Right?
Yeah. Luckily, most days, one of us wants to be a realtor when the other one doesn't. And so like, it really does help that like it's huge because I really don't know how people do this alone often because it can be done. But I know just even the two of us sometimes being in this world trying to move through it, it's hard. And it's one of those things that's helpful to have.
To be able to like turn to someone and be like, well, that was nuts. Or like, we did that. Or like, oh, we're fucked, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
To just look over and be like.
And to just also for the good things too. Cause like we'd finish shoots sometimes at like 5 a.m. and then we'd get home to our place in Kentucky at that time and watch RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars was on at that time. So we were watching that like for an hour, and it's nice that your co-collaborator is also the person that you're like living domestically with and then going back like maybe 3 hours later.
Yeah. So. Colby, did you have a favorite restaurant in your hometown that catered? Notice I'm hung up on the hometown thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Kirchhoff's Bakery downtown is like the spot when Sam and I were feeling, we need to just go do something together, feeling a little stressed. We would go get Kirchhoff's, which has been there for, I forget how many years.
Right. And everyone loved Etc. Coffee was a place everyone
Etc.
to.
Nice.
But like all the actors knew the baristas by name and stuff. It was really cool to see that. So it is really special when you get to do a hometown.
I know. I'm caught up in that fantasy. How did you guys meet?
So we met actually here in Chicago about 12 years ago at this. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the chain of bars called Charley's, but we met at 3 a.m. on a Monday night in a gay country western bar called Charley's. We were both 22 at the time. And I think we were just like, him and his friends were out, me and my friends were out, and there was like no one else in the bar.
And
first of all, Monday at 3 a.m.
I said, I was 22.
So listen, in Chicago, the bars close. There are 2 a.m. bars and there are 4 a.m. bars.
Right.
And so when the 2 a.m. bars, there's usually sometimes if you're still out and you're trying to, we're in our early 20s, you scramble off to a 4 a.m. bar.
Right.
And so each one of us had a friend that was like, let's go to Charley's. Let's go to 4. And so we showed up and they were the only other people in there.
Which was funny because like we just kind of just started talking at the bar and just chatting for a while, and then all of our friends left and we were still at the bar chatting, and we were like, okay, well, I guess we should do this again sometime. So we went on a date a couple days later and it went really well. That Friday actually, yeah. And then we had a great date that time too. We went to karaoke at Bobby Love's, that's also in Boys Town, and then about a couple months later we were like officially boyfriends, and then we've been together basically for, collectively 12 years, married for 2 years. So.
That's fantastic. Now, did you guys discover early on, I'm sure that you both loved films and like that you were interested in that world? Was that something that connected you in the beginning?
Yeah. I mean, these are all really good questions. It's so funny because it's like we were very different in our routes of, what we were doing in life. Like I had just finished film school. I was working as a video editor in Chicago, and then Colby.
I come from like speech and debate theater, and so I moved.
There's a book that you have to read called Speech Team. We had a previous guest on. It's about the speech team that gets together like 20 years later to go deal with a teacher that was inappropriate back in the day. It's called Speech Team by Tim Murphy. He's a wonderful author. I had him on the podcast. I'm kind of obsessed with this book.
Sure.
And I think there's talk of it being a movie.
Yeah, that would be of interest. I did competitive speech and debate in college.
I did too. I did like drama and humor. What was your thing? What was your area?
I did duo, prose, poetry, DI, all of those type things. Duo was probably my favorite.
Duo acting? Like
duo
acting. With another person. All right.
With another person.
Okay, what was your triumphant high point of Speech Team?
I got a national semifinal in duo acting with Samantha Harrison.
And what was your scene?
It was a piece called The Boys and Girls Guide to Getting Down.
Right on.
It was this like kind of cheeky piece where it's like a documentary but about partying. So it's all these little scenes of like, you know, different characters like partying, and it was very, very college. I think it was silly, but I loved it.
You crushed it though. It clearly got crushed by you. So there's that. So you guys, I take it you're film lovers as well. Is there a movie that you disagree on, that one of you loves and the other one is like, I don't get it at all?
Ooh, good question.
Oh, wow.
Or do you like the same things?
It's funny because we do like a lot of the same things, but I do feel like what happens a lot will be like, we will have different like or dislike of a movie leaving. Like it happens a lot when we'll leave a theater. Like we'll watch a movie and be like, oh wow, I really liked that. And you'd be like, I thought this thing or that thing about the actor and whatever. And like, it's funny, we kind of zero in on different things. Like, this is a good one. Like I like a lot of Darren Aronofsky stuff. And I feel like you're less about it the way I am because I'm really into the style of it. Mm-hmm. And you like the acting and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I'm into like my favorite director is Mike Nichols. The Birdcage, I think, is a perfect movie.
Yeah. Interesting. I like it.
Yeah. And so, you know, I think Black Swan is yours, but I appreciate it, like, because I understand why he likes it. And there are a lot of things I love about Black Swan.
But I do know that's definitely not like your bag as much as mine, in the same way that like, the stuff around like Mike Nichols movies and stuff, maybe you'll have more of a
and that's why when our tastes mix together, it comes out as a really specific thing. So it's like, I just really can't imagine us doing it separately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you guys able to do that as your thing, or do you do other things on the side? You mentioned video editing. Like, how do you manage your creative lives with,
It's funny because I was a full-time video editor for about 10 plus years. I'm trying to lean more further into the full establishment as a filmmaker. And obviously as an independent filmmaker, you have to, you're going through a few different tracks and working your way through it. But we are trying to, at this phase, lean further into this being our full focus. But primarily, I was a video editor for the entire, and Colby's done all through all this time.
Oh yeah, you mentioned realty earlier. I used to be a realtor.
He was
right on.
I don't do it anymore.
About 10 years ago. That's so funny.
Yeah,
I could see you smiling from a bench or something. Like I feel like you would be a good realtor.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a photo that exists that Sam took of me being like, I'm your realtor.
Yeah.
But no, I've done this and that. I've done a lot of event production, but my focus has been building our business as film directors, and it is a business that you have to run in certain ways. I mean, I'm sure this everything that you do.
Yeah.
So it's like all creatives, we wear many hats.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of your thing. What was it like to leave LA? Was it time, or you felt like did you feel like there wasn't much there for you, or what went into that decision?
Well, it's funny because when I was my job at the time transferred me out there, and my family lives in South Bend. Colby's family lives in Kentucky. It just felt really far from home for us personally. We just felt like there was a lot of stuff that we were going back and forth with a lot at the end there. And I do remember it being something where I was like, okay, I can now work remotely. This was like literally right at the start of the pandemic as well, when we moved from LA to back to Midwest. And it just made a lot of sense for us to be closer to home at that time. And in some ways with LA, it did just feel like it was time. Like one thing that's really interesting about LA was how transient it felt. But then there's also people that are there for a long time, like Pete. And it's one of those things where we saw a wide mix. But the nice thing is I'm glad we never left and felt jaded or angsty about LA. Like we love our time that we had there. I look forward to going to Akbar the next time I'm there. I look forward to going to all the places I loved going. And, it just was one of those places for us. I felt like Chicago was a place that we had a lot of strong roots in, and we were excited to come back here because we love the city.
I do just love I think it was less LA and more that we love Chicago.
Yeah. So you never screamed "fuck this place" from the 101.
No,
honestly.
Yeah, I get why. I'm glad. Like it can do that, but like,
well, and I had a realization at one point too that like working in independent film, it's actually sometimes prohibitive to be in Los Angeles. For our first feature that we shot while we lived there, to be able to afford shooting locations, we had to drive out to Indio, out to the Coachella Valley, because when you're trying to get a location in Los Angeles, when you have
whatever big studio
whatever streamer or studio offering $12,000 to a coffee shop, your kind of requests for, maybe you got $100 or you got nothing. They're going to be like, oh, haha.
Right.
Out in India, it was like, yeah, sure.
Or a small town in Kentucky or Arizona, those places. And
Yeah.
Well, and also there are places we haven't seen before in the movie. Like there's that building where it was like where people would cruise in your movie, like by the like this little pavilion. Like it was unique. It had a sense of a place and a different kind of thing. What movie scared you in your life? Either when you were younger or more recent.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. What's one that's scared you more recently? I'm curious about that.
Oh, well, I have I was going to go with the one that I saw when I was 10 or something, and it really freaked me out. There's a scene it's bullying. I have an issue with bullying that it really bothers me. But there's this scene at the beginning of Stir of Echoes, which it has Kevin Bacon in it. He moves into a house that's haunted. But the very first scene is about this girl that gets bullied and, unfortunately killed. And I saw it and it was just so graphic. And that has stuck with me more than anything, which is such a random movie or random moment. But if I'm being honest, that's the scariest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. Sometimes it's the more real things more than the, haunted dolls or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, all kids my age, I was 13 when The Ring came out, and that scared the shit out of me. And I remember 7 days later, I was crying in my mom's car on a drive somewhere, be I think I'm going to die tonight because I watched The Ring 7 days ago. So that was but it's nice that to be able to remember those visceral ways those made you feel and the ways that you can try to implement it. In a modern sense, I watched Long Legs recently, and I was pretty creeped out by that movie for different reasons. I really enjoyed what that brought back in those same types of feelings,
There's a scene in your movie involving electroconvulsive therapy, shock therapy. I had a filmmaker on a few weeks ago, a month or so ago, that made a documentary called Conversion about conversion therapy. And I think at least one or two of the people in his movie had that. What was it like to have that prop and do those scenes? And did you look into what those machines look like? Where did you get the machine?
Sure.
What was that like to depict?
Well, obviously, first I'll say, it's a device that it's the outdated ECT machine. Typically when ECT is being done, and they do it still today for very valid reasons, and it's very clinical and different. You can treat depression, addiction, etc. with it.
Not homosexuality.
Not homosexuality. Not an approved treatment.
Yes.
So we wanted to make it so that it was this demented preacher who has this old machine that he uses on himself. And so we set out to find an actual 1970s ECT machine. And our lovely production designer, Missy Fowler, found that on eBay, ordered it, made it so that it was no longer active. It was not, able to actually do anything. But it is an actual machine.
And Jordan probably was one of the main people that sold the actual efficacy of the treatment itself in the scenes. It was wild. We'd be setting up for scenes, and he'd be off somewhere watching One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest a million times, watching how Jack Nicholson shocked himself.
He goes there. Jordan goes there.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
In a lot of those scenes, how did he come in and out of that? Was he an actor that needed his space to be by himself? You could feel the trauma with him.
Yeah, it was really incredible to watch the way he worked. And it's a good question because I'm sure with always different routes, it seemed like it was something he really knew a great way of how to manage his space when and how he needed it. He's such a wonderful light. He's so friendly, kind to every single person on the crew. He's just an upbeat person, but these are such dark scenes. And one thing that was helpful with the film and the process was that the vibe was typically very positive in the midst of this really heavy subject
matter. We tried to keep it light, you know, on set. We're dealing with such heavy stuff that it's we really need to feel we're approaching this, we're going to go for it when it's time. But in between, I think, be very light. And I felt like I saw Jordan, pulling on the strength of our other lovely crew members who had just a good vibe to them, and to kind of like lean on them for like, okay, like I'm in between this, but I'm going to chat for a second.
Yeah. Cultivating just a safe space for it and a positive space for it, I think made it easy for him to go in and out. And he was always really good also at communicating when and how he would need things. And we tried to keep that line of communication as open as possible for him to always be like, hey, I just need a minute to like, take some space from everyone and stuff, and being like, absolutely. So he was just really good with being able to move in and out of that. And it's a really difficult thing to do. So, huge props to him for doing it.
You really felt his pain and his self-loathing and his, and he's in this fucked up family. Anyway, he took you there.
Yeah.
I want to hear what you guys think about something I observed while watching your movie. I think there was a time when you couldn't make a thriller dealing with these issues because we had to be earnest. We had to be, it's so serious, and it is serious. But I think now there have been enough stories. There's enough, you see the damage. It's so clear what these kinds of homophobia and religion and shock therapy, you see how fucked up it is. And so I think you can go where you guys go. And maybe it wouldn't have been so, it wouldn't have played so well 15, 20 years ago. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that, on where we are in terms of telling gay stories and taking them into genre places?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic question. And I think one thing that has always been really difficult with queer storytelling is, how do you take your own personal trauma and just make sure you're not doing an additional trauma dump in some sort of way that sometimes it can feel like people, and that's a tricky thing, because all experiences are valid. You want to make sure you're putting that out there. But how do you find a twist for it for yourself in whatever way that is honest to you and feels like it could be constructive for the journey that of other people who are on this? I know for myself, this movie deals with a lot of hard stuff that I have had in my own life. Colby has had in his own life. Some things exactly related to us, some things not. But when it comes to the dark subject matter, we wanted to serve it to be able to show that there's also light. And I think that's kind of reflective of the time we're in right now, where there is a lot of hardship and darkness, but there's also a lot of positive forward moving forces as well. And I think that's where we are right now.
And they're right next door to each other.
Yeah.
They're coexisting in the same spaces.
So our story is trying to tell the point that, yes, there are really hard things that can be out there. There are also really wonderful things out there. And we wanted to show that, in spite of the silence that people might try to force on you, in spite of the silence you might feel, there is a promise for something better at the end. That's not to go too deep into the spoiler of this film, but we did want to have positive things happen at the end that really do help it not feel like this is just a doom and gloom type of story that ends with doom and gloom. And that personally for me was based off the fact that I watched, I'm not sure if you remember the film Latter Days. It was like that movie.
Yeah, I know the filmmaker, CJ Cox. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, if you ever talk to them anytime soon, let them know that movie for someone like me was something I held on to. And right before I was coming out, I literally used to watch that movie underneath the blankets of my dorm room to make sure that if my roommate walked in, he wouldn't see me watching this gay movie and being like, okay. I remember holding on to those scenes that of queer love and being like, this is something that I really hope I can re-emulate for myself one day when it comes to being able to tell a story that has hardship, but also has light and hope. And that's what I really loved about that movie, is that, yes, it showed hardship, but it also showed promise for a forward future. So that's something we were trying to do with this as well.
And in terms of how it is now making a queer film versus in the past, I think although there were some challenges, obviously, the industry has caught on that there is an audience for queer films, especially as more queer people feel safe to come out. And as more queer people do come out, that affects their families. Those people become viewers of queer content. And so I do think that, unfortunately, part of what has made the industry come on queer films is that they've been able to monetize it in a way that wasn't acceptable in the past. It's distributors are going towards queer films. Some, it's not something that is as controversial, but something that we wanted to point out that sometimes feels in conflict with that is that as things have gotten better, they've also gotten worse in the places that it is worse.
Right.
The queer acceptance is an all-time high, but so is anti-queer rhetoric and violence And those two things are linked. And I think that's a big part of this film.
Right. The darkest place to be in your movie is in that supposedly happy Christian home. Like those dinner scenes, that is some sinister shit, and you feel it. I love that Latter Days really made a huge impact on you. I was raised Mormon, so I connected with that story. It was about two missionaries, right, that fall in love?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, one who was from Los Angeles and was out and proud, and the other who would just visit, who's now on a mission there. And it's funny how that movie, I feel like, was really ahead of its time for what was otherwise a very repressive and difficult time to be able to make a queer film. Yeah, I love that movie so much.
I think when you're doing queer stories, or even what I'm doing, where I'm my work's very gay or whatever, I think there's a thing where you're like, well, you're clearly not going for the money. This is clearly not a money move on your, you could go about a different career and make more money. Yeah. And yet, so when you hear a story where somebody really held on to a movie, like it meant something to them in their lives, that is really powerful. And I'm sure if I can get to CJ Cox and let him know, I think it'd make his week, because it's not a big money move when you're telling these kind of stories. Was there a movie for you, Colby, or something queer that you held on to in that same way?
Well, I mean, I mentioned it once already, but The Birdcage, because it really is, it's a queer story, but it is about family. And there's something that I love about that film is there's something for everybody, even if you somehow identify with Gene Hackman's character,
right?
In Birdcage, like maybe if you can hold on to him and get through the film from his perspective, like maybe you're changed a little bit, and that's what keeps you there. And so I think with our film, we seek to do something similar, where like even if you're like as backwards thinking as Big Lee, if his presence in that film can somehow keep you there just by virtue of like, well, I'm with him.
And then make you realize he's kind of...
if you see where he ends up at the end, maybe that message will like sink into you, And so, The Birdcage.
The Birdcage, very cool. All right, tell people how they can see your movie, how they can watch Ganymede.
Yeah, currently it is now available domestically on VOD. You can find it on Apple TV. You can find it on Fandango. You can find it on Amazon Prime. And
probably your cable provider. VOD as well.
It's currently for purchase or rental. Down the road, it will likely also find some sort of roads on streaming or what have you. Support queer film, support film that is out there, that is independent. This was made with a lot of love and a lot of hard work from so many different people with so much creativity that, all put in their heart for the message that it was. So, and also thank you, Dennis, for, championing the story in the way that you're putting it out there and sharing with others, because we're really grateful that there is voice and elevation for queer film and media.
Well, I appreciate it. I think it's cool. I was into it. And, and I think your cast did a great job. And I like that it was just something different. And I was into it. And there were times when I laughed, and, it was cool. I was into it. When you embark on putting out a film, I bet there's a huge learning curve to how distribution works now. It's not the way it used to be, like understanding streaming and numbers, and what if it's Netflix, but if they don't do it, do we go to Canopy? Like what surprised you about the learning of this new way of getting movies out there?
Well, that everybody's trying to figure it out. It's not just us trying to figure it out. It's like the industry is in a period of like remaking kind of. And
it changed from the time that you wrote this to the time we put it out.
Right.
Crazy.
And so, we're all kind of figuring this out together. And I don't think anybody has the true answer where we'll end up. But yeah, that's the most surprising thing, is we're all making it up. It's not just us.
Right.
But you tell a story as truly and honestly as you can for yourself. And then you really do see as you go how it's received by people throughout the industry process. But I like to think that the movies that end up being successful are the ones that take the risks and then end up getting the audience reception that they get. So you kind of just have to do what's true to you. Honestly.
Yeah, like if you want to have any chance to connect with people, you got to do something real that you connect with. And, if you're out there trying to come up with a perfect formula for success, that's just as hard as just doing something vulnerable that what you're doing,
Yeah, but art and commerce is important. And that is something that we also did learn throughout this process too, is like you do have to find that balance of like, okay, how do I tell something that's true to myself, but also make sure it's not just for myself and stuff like that. So it's been a wild crash course. I think that's a really great question.
Well, it's also like the wild, wild west. Like I could imagine being a filmmaker and getting a movie on Netflix and then saying, okay, here's the amount that you get every time somebody watches it. And to me, it could be either $17,000 or 11 cents. Like I have no idea how that works. Yeah. And you also feel like, because nobody does, they could screw people if they, I don't know how it works, but
it's hard to predict. It's like the audience is once it's out of your hands, it's like you almost don't know what and you don't know what you have until the audience sees it.
Right.
It's kind of,
And you could also understand back in the day when people went to the movies or they rented a DVD, you could the numbers made a little more sense and you had some idea what you're dealing with. Here's my final question for both of you. It's 30 years from now. What's a moment from making this movie that you will always remember? From either the experience of shooting it or the screening it, or just a moment that you're like, okay, I'm never going to forget that.
Okay. I have to say for myself, one thing that really, if we're just talking production, I think one thing that always will stick with me as a positive thing is that like at the end of these shoots where we were like, working we did this in 19 days and it was about 10 to 12 hour days each day. And often it was overnight, and kind of that thing what I was saying about watching like RuPaul's Drag Race after like doing this insane day and like that being our last hour of the day before we fell asleep and got up like 3 or 4 hours later. I will always remember going and watching those whatever TV shows in that last hour and laughing about whatever were the fun things about the shoot day. Laughing about the things that were fun with the crew or with Steve or what have you. Like I will always remember those things, and anything that was hard, the body forgets pain, I think often. So like, I do feel like those things the good things of those are always going to stick with me, I think, in a positive way. So.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Yeah.
And I agree with that too. Those will stick with me as well. But something that I thought of that, was really special was that, my mother got to be a hair consultant on this.
Your mother got to be a what?
A hair consultant on this project.
That's amazing.
She was, taking care of Robyn's wig and just making sure.
I'm sorry, Robyn's wig was the shit. That was giving you full Sandy Bullock blindside realness.
Yeah, we loved it.
She was so great.
I didn't think it was a wig. And us gays,
maybe
us gays. The Nicole Kidman movie on Netflix now with Zac Efron. All anyone's talking about is that bad wig. So,
interesting. I haven't even seen it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Clock.
Yeah.
But no. So she was there for like each day of the shoot, and just to have her there on set as a comfort, and for her to get to see Sam and I, doing what we love to do was just so special. And 30 years from now, I know I'll look back at every one of those moments and be so glad that she was there and we got to share that.
Mama Lisa.
I'm telling this story too. This is an edgy story for a mom to be around, right?
Yeah. Oh, and she's, I'll give her credit too. One of the lines from the film that people respond to is something she said to somebody in real life, which is, I don't know about your God, but my God doesn't make mistakes.
And she had to say that to someone.
She said that in response to someone who was saying, well, aren't you worried about, his morality with, him being gay? And she said, no. She turned her hairdryer off, set it down.
Yeah.
And delivered that line. And so it made it into the movie. And so that's a little bit of homage to, both of our mothers.
Well, your mother was a wonderful hair consultant. She crushed it. It was crushed.
I'd be thrilled to hear that wasn't even realized as a wig.
So. Yeah. No, that's a real badge of honor. Yeah, you guys, it's been really fun talking to you. Congrats on the movie, and I hope to see the other things that you have coming down the pike. And if you're ever in LA, let's meet at Akbar.
Absolutely.
Which is still there. It's hanging on.
I know.
Some things change. Yeah.
Learn the Words, which was like our favorite night there with Tony Soto. It was like literally our favorite thing. So absolutely.
Which night? Which night was your
Learn
favorite?
the Words, bitch, on Monday.
The first Monday of every month, Tony Soto does Learn the Words, bitch. Best show in LA.
What happens in it?
Oh, they all lip sync.
It's like
it's a lip sync show. Learn the Words, bitch.
Yeah, but it's not just drag queens. It's like anybody who has any kind of like dream wig and a lip sync, they like do it. It's so funny.
And people commit. It's like karaoke for lip syncing, and like people do all sorts of like They bring in backup dancers. Like it's gotten, for last I saw it had gotten really intense. And I know on Tony's Instagram that he still posts about it. So I'm happy to see that it's still happening. But
all right. Well, I'm going to make that, I'm going to go to that, and that'll be my new thing. Awesome.
Yeah. First Monday of each month. Just definitely check it out.
All right.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, guys. Thanks again to Colby Holt and Sam Probst. Check out their movie Ganymede on video on demand. Okay, so this happened. I saw a show last night at the Gay and Lesbian Center's Renberg Theater, which is where we do the mismatch game, and it kind of blew my mind. It's called Happy Fall, a Queer Stunt Spectacular. And first of all, I walk in there, and the Renberg looks different. I think they removed literally rows of seats so they could have more room. And it's a story about two stuntmen who fall in love. They're Hollywood stuntmen. They work in the movies. It's modern day. But it also threads in a lot of stuff about the history of Hollywood and stunts and things like that. But the way this story is told is kind of mind-blowing. First of all, there's a lot of actual stunt work, physical fighting, swords, punches, jumps, lots of crash pads. It's a lot, right? And then they do all this amazing work with green screens and cameras in different places and puppets. And then there's like small puppets and then life-size puppets. And technically it is so ambitious. And I was just like, my mind was blown about what they were setting out to do and pulling off in the Renberg, where I basically do index cards for a mismatch game. Like, this is like a much more technically challenging enterprise. And I was just knocked out. So if you're in LA, go see Happy Fall, a Queer Stunt Spectacular at the LA LGBT Center. And you can learn about that at lalgbtcenter.org. That's enough for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Speaking of mismatch, I want to get a plug-in for Gay Days Mismatch Game is coming up on September 14th. So if you're going to be at Gay Days Disneyland in Anaheim, we're doing the mismatch game on Saturday the 14th. Come and see us. You can learn about that at gaydaysanaheim.com. And also the 20th anniversary of Mismatch Game is coming up in September 28th, the day before my 60th birthday. We're going to do a double blowout in honor of the 20th anniversary and my birthday. So tickets for that are going fast too. lalgbtcenter.org. Also, what else? Oh, I want to shout out Oscar Rosario for mixing the episodes. My theme music is by Mark Daniels for Placement Music. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time on Dennis Anyone. Bye.